Welcome in the zone. I'm Jyll Saskin. I'm a Google Ads coach and the founder of Inside Google Ads. And I'm here with Kirk Williams, the founder of Zato Marketing. We are live recording this conversation. We're going to be talking about Google Marketing Live, about Google Ads, about being a content creator for the next hour. So let's jump in. Kirk, how are you doing today?
Good. Yeah. Say I just showed up 15 seconds ago. We are. Yeah, that's right. Ready for a chat. We didn't really get to chat too much in Mountain View. So
I know we were in Mountain View at Google Marketing Live in person for the last couple days. I took a red eye home, so I missed what I heard was a bit of a strange musical performance.
It was amazing.
What happened?
No, it was amazing and strange. No, it was just hilarious. No, T-Pain performed, did the show. He was pretty funny. He had a few comments, but he said something about like, y'all have been on emails all day, you know? And I was like, yeah, he knows who he's singing to. But did amazing. Like, he has an unbelievable voice. Especially he did Tennessee Whiskey and like crushed it. So then he gets to his third song and he gets done. And like after the first song, he was like, whoa, that was a little fast to the pianist. And then he's like, the second song, he's like, that was a little too slow. I don't know if that was part of the bit or what. And then the third song, he like ended, he's like, well, they didn't tell me how to end this. So, and then he literally like kind of did this goofy like shuffle and just walked away. And we were all like, again, like, is this a bit? Is whatever? And then eventually like, people started talking, the overhead music kicked on, and it was just like, no, that was it.
That was it.
he's out.
Right.
Okay. So our guess is either he made a ridiculous ton of money for 3 songs, or this was a favor to a Googler, which is maybe why he didn't care. So I don't know.
Got it. Well, what a way to wrap up GML. And so did you just get home yesterday then?
Yeah, yesterday afternoon.
Yeah. How were all the kids in your absence?
They were good. So we're like May is such a crazy month for a lot of people. I've heard it called Maycember. And so my oldest kid is on a field trip in another city. And then my wife and my second oldest were gone on a field trip. So her mom was like watching the kids. I flew in, basically like she handed them off to me, and then like, you know, full on dadding right after the trip. So exactly. We may have had some tablet time last evening.
Gotta love that tablet time.
That's exactly.
I was going to say, are your kids on YouTube Kids?
They are, yeah.
Yeah, mine too. Well, speaking of YouTube, let's talk a little about GML and our observations being there in the room.
Nice transition.
Happened. Thank you. Not the singing, just the transition part. So one of the things I really noticed about this event was normally at Google Marketing Live, it's like Google. YouTube was almost a bigger brand than Google. There were tons of YouTube announcements. There were the YouTube creators on stage. Of all the YouTube stuff, what kind of excited or surprised you most?
I think that, and what I mean by that is Google has primarily been a capturing demand channel that we all kind of know, right? You know, your listeners are probably advanced enough, but you know, basically the idea of like someone has to generate some sort of interest in what you're selling, and then at some point you capture that interest. So rather than like demand creation or demand generation, demand capture. And search is, for the most part, you're capturing existing demand, and obviously like you have to be aware of something in order to search for it, right? And so to me, in the last year or so, I think like it's like everyone has just really they become aware of the fact that like YouTube is Google's demand generation platform, and like they know that, we know that, everything, right? But it's almost like that's actually where budgets started going, at least from what I could see in the last couple of years, that sort of thing. So I wonder if Google is more and more also just realizing that and trying to lean increasingly into that. And that's also where some of that stuff like incrementality testing comes from. Like incrementality testing is really going to help YouTube, I think, because like Google doesn't have to play fast and loose with attribution numbers or whatever. It actually is super in their benefit to show the incremental, lift of YouTube, but which people haven't really done that. The attributed brand stuff is interesting. Like it's almost like they woke up and they're like, we really like YouTube is good. like let's figure out how to prove that.
Newsflash, so, YouTube is good.
Yeah, exactly. They're like, oh wow, no, it is, So, and that could have been part of the long-term plan, but yeah.
I'll agree with that. There were, whether it was sort of like the new shoppable CTV and masthead, the attributed brand searches, which I think is so cool. Mm-hmm. Obviously, Performance Max includes YouTube. There was AI generated, YouTube videos, like take a few pictures of a product and they'll create a video. So like the creators hub to work with YouTube creators, lots of these video enhancements. What was really funny to me about that, as someone who spends a lot of time in the interface with my coaching clients, is video campaigns in Google Ads feel like there's no strategy. Like they've been constantly changing. I feel like every time I log into Google Ads and create a video campaign, the options change. It looks different. We know that recently the drive conversions video campaign subtype moved to demand gen. So now if you want to run YouTube with a conversion-based or click-based bid strategy, you have to run demand gen, and you can choose channels to do so. And then if you want to run video on a reach or engagement objective, you can do it in a video campaign. But I don't know. So even a video campaign, you have to then choose a subtype. It is the only campaign type in Google Ads where that's the case. So I did feel
if you just want to do shorts, it's demand gen. It's just,
right.
Yeah.
So there felt like this disconnect between the reality of running YouTube in Google Ads today and all this shiny new toys that are coming. And I'm curious to see how that gets reconciled as these things roll out.
That's a really good point. I haven't really thought of that, but you're exactly right. I don't do as much with video advertising like myself. So I'm always going to my team and I'm like, what does this even mean? And like, when did that show up? Like shorts. I'm like, how do we advertise shorts, a while back? And they're like, well, it's in demand gen. And then Google added the ability to like just select that, which was cool. But agree with you. There just doesn't really seem to be any rhyme nor reason. And that's what, you and I were in some of those closed door sessions, which, super NDA, blah, blah, blah. We want to get invited back.
Yes.
But I think some of the general feedback, like all of us advertisers have given online, as well as some of the stuff we talked about in there, was just the need to like help us better understand how to use their products, like make that a little simpler. Like what, if there's a way to do this well, like communicate that a little better to your advertisers rather than just all of this like stuff you can do. And
I'll add to that, the way a large advertiser uses this stuff well is different than the way a small advertiser does. And again, I know we can't share what was shared, but I can share words that I said, which is I was frequently saying, well, can I just ask how that works for a small business advertiser? Or let me tell you, I agree with you, except when it's a really small budget. And it's interesting because often the advice that I will give to small business owners or people new to Google Ads, if they're lead generation, just start with search, exact match keywords, smart bidding. If you are e-commerce, just start with standard shopping, try to get to target rows as quickly as you can. I'm debating whether video, or maybe demand gen video, I should say, becomes part of that beginner strategy or not. Because it really feels, especially with things like AI overviews and AI mode and changing consumer behavior, like, is it enough to just advertise on queries now? I don't, maybe in 2025 it's still enough, but like in 2026 and 2027, is that going to be enough of a way to reach enough of your target audience to just focus on when they're searching? I don't know.
I think so. Like we'll do a small budget advertising as well. And yeah, I especially appreciated your comments, which by the way, like props to Google for like the people they brought in the room to give feedback. There was a wide variety of us, from like massive corporation people to small budget people to e-commerce to lead gen. Like there were some tool people that could speak to APIs. Like I actually thought that was really cool. Yeah. Like Jenny did a great job of bringing that. Exactly right. So it really did feel like there were like representatives of a lot of voices in the room. So I thought that was cool. But just in terms of like video for small budgets, I really think that it could be worth testing, but I think it's going to be dependent on a couple of things. One being just like creative, if you're going to test on junk like that's probably not going to work. And that can be another struggle of SMBs, although can AI video more the future really help with that? Probably, you know, but then also some sort of testing strategy. I'll tell you what, SMBs have a huge benefit over big companies in one way, and that is it's actually a lot easier to test like single channel incrementality with real small companies, because you can minimize all of the other changes you're doing, and you can invest some cash in that specific channel or test, and be much more likely to actually like identify, did anything change or not, right? Real big companies with so much going on and so much money being spent everywhere, you really have to be dialed in on very specific tests, where I think there's an argument for some small budget companies. Let's say they do have a great, you know, a couple of great videos that they know have worked maybe on Facebook, you know, figure out a budget and like, yeah, test that for a couple months on YouTube, and really like don't be super focused on whether you see specific attributed sales, but like look to see if overall call volume and things went up. And if that's about the only thing you're doing differently, you should actually be able to tell if it's working well. And if it is, then like keep pushing money at that. So,
or see if your attributed brand searches go up from that.
Yeah.
Video campaign. And that feature, for those just in a nutshell, is basically Google's now going to give us this metric, attributed brand searches, where you'll be able to see of people who view your YouTube ads and then search. Actually, it's really confusing to try to explain it in a nutshell, but how many of them will search for your brand versus not, and what is the brand lift, so to speak, that happens. And so previously you needed to spend a lot of money and use this thing called search lift, which you needed a Google rep to do, but now all Google Ads accounts will be able to see this attributed brand searches metric, which is a new way, or rather an existing way that you could measure the impact of video, but now everyone will be able to see it versus just large budget advertisers. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So one of the things about all of this, like attributed brand, incrementality testing, stuff like that, though, that I think is going to have to be figured out by Google over the long term is, in the past with attribution, they've just often looked in their own silo and then made assumptions there. And like, as you and I know, like a business is far more than one marketing channel. And I think if Google ever really wants to move aggressive, and I don't quite know all, you know, what their plans are and everything, but I think if they ever really want to aggressively move into super accurate tracking, incrementality, that sort of thing, they're going to really need a lot of that data from a lot of those sources to then start looking into things like attributed, you know, brand lift and stuff like that. So I don't know. I think there's still some things there too that would be interesting to watch over time and see what happens. So
yeah, there was some like GA4 of the many announcements of GML. There was something about GA4 cross-platform reporting. We'll sort of see, you know, it's like Google, yes, we're going to tell you how well we do compared to Meta and TikTok. We'll see how much we can trust that. But something I actually really wanted to talk to you about today, Kirk, is e-commerce and Merchant Center. I know that you love to get your hands dirty in Google Merchant Center. I saw you speak about it at Hero Conference in San Diego last year. And there were quite a few Merchant Center announcements at GML. So I'd love to hear what you make of some of those new developments, especially in light of the fact that Merchant Center Next is still a relatively new product.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So here's like my weakness is if I'm at an event like that and I hear certain things I'm interested in, and then I start taking notes or tweeting, like I miss other stuff. And then I have to like read, you know, follow-up stuff. So about the only thing I really remember about Merch Center, other than some conversations I had, and again, like I can't remember which of those conversations was like NDA private stuff I can't reveal or not. There was some really cool product studio conversations I had. So definitely be watching the space for, you know, just continued updates, which is no surprise to anyone, as, you know, their AI aggressively works at this stuff. But I will tell you the number one thing I am probably of all of GML that I am excited about is I think the incrementality being lowered to 5,000 is cool, but it is the A/B testing of feed attributes. That is something, like, first of all, I will throw shade a little bit and be like, that is something that honestly, like, we should have had years ago. Okay, cool. We get it now. I am so excited about that because, like, when so you go to test an image, right? Like there are only a couple ways that you can do that currently within Merchant Center, and it involves kind of hacking a test that can be a little, we don't have to go into all the specifics and that, but you're kind of like hacking things, and sometimes you're doing like asynchronous testing, so then that doesn't really help because things change over time. Or maybe you're like testing different variants, but the problem is that Merge Center often like advertises a variant harder than the other, so that's not a true test. And like there's all these things where you're like, okay, if I change out the image or I change out the title, like what happened? And at some level, we try to keep our eyes on impression share and impressions and things like that. But at the end of the day, there's just a lot of we just don't know with attributes, right? When you optimize them, and it kind of sounds like two things. Like, first of all, we'll just start to know if the changes we made actually impact something, which is amazing. But then the second thing is, especially in like starting to try to think through reverse engineering some of this stuff, we might actually really see over time, especially with big data sets, like which attribute changes tend to have bigger impact than others, which can start leading all of us to like, I mean, we all kind of know things like title is more important than that, but like color is not a required attribute unless it's for apparel. But hey, let's add that in on some random, a coffee machine, whatever, which we try to do anyways. But if we can start to see, no, that actually does have an impact, then that becomes a really important thing we do, and not just hey, let's make sure we try to do that if we remember, right? So I think it actually can guide our optimizations a lot more. So yeah, as you can tell, I'm excited about it. So.
I thought you would be. I remember, because I know that you love this space, and it's really interesting to see these new capabilities come in. Because in a way, I've always thought of like Google Merchant Center and feeds kind of like SEO, and that like we sort of have an idea how it works, but we don't really fully understand how Google matches 100%. Your website or your feed to queries. I mean, arguably, we don't even know that when we do use exact match keywords, but like, it's like you give us your feed and then we kind of figure it out for you. And so having that A/B testing capability, I hear you saying it's for the first time, we'll actually be able to see what the impact is on the queries, on the engagement, on the conversion, which is very cool.
Yeah, it will be. Yeah, I think so. So yeah, so I'm excited for that.
I hope it actually rolls out, because some of these announcements they say coming soon, like one of them was the brand profile, which they announced at GML last year as a way to customize the way your brand looks in search results. It never rolled out. And then once again, they're saying brand profile is coming, and it's coming soon. So I'll launch it at GML 2026, and brand profile is coming.
We'll see.
We'll see. Now,
but again, the idea being it's a cool idea, of just more and more being able to communicate to, and like, just to be clear, that's really important as we go more and more AI automated focus, because there really does need to be a way for advertiser, user, brand feedback to be entered back into the machine to help guide what they're doing, just to, help give those guidelines for the automation. So.
Absolutely. I mean, one of the biggest AI announcements was actually pre-announced, but for those who are not as chronically online as you and I, it may have been news to them at GML, is AI Max for search campaigns, formerly colloquially known as Search Max. And so this is a real shift in the way search works. Arguably, is it a repackaging of existing concepts? Is it actually something new? So I'd love to hear your thoughts on AI Max, how you're feeling about it. Yeah, what do you think of AI Max, Kirk?
Yeah, so I have not tested it yet. So basically everything I know is what's been fed through the Google lens. So I think there's a healthy dosage of like, here's kind of what we know and here's what we'll see. To me, there's some level of, this always happens to me with Google announcements. And this is also their like, smart bidding exploration, things like that, where there's almost kind of this like, hey, we promise this is a really smart system on the back end. And there's just some level where like, we're kind of putting a little bit of trust in like, yeah, okay, I hope that's true, and then eventually, let's actually use it and see, right? Because that's where the real proof in the pudding is like, does it actually drive more conversions, efficiently? But with AI Max, it does sound, my understanding is, let's call it like DSA driven by PMax algorithms? I mean, is that like
search only PMAX?
Yeah. That's kind of what it seems like. It seems like search only PMAX. So I honestly don't really know what I think of it yet. But I do think it's weird that we still have search in PMAX, but now like search only PMAX. So I would love for us to have like shopping only PMAX and search only PMAX. But
that sort of defeats the point, right? Like something I've been noticing with so many of the PMAX changes that we saw, channel reporting and search term reports and negative keywords and asset level reporting. And earlier this year, we got even asset group reporting, which I can't believe we didn't have before. Brand exclusions and like all this stuff is happening. And I don't get what the strategy is from Google. Like I know I don't get the product strategy because the whole point of PMAX was trust us. Give us your data, give us your goals, and we will go out there and achieve it for you. And of course, it kind of sucked at first, but then it got pretty good in certain circumstances. I guess it got pretty good if you could give it enough data so that it could learn and go out and do it. And now it's like gone in this opposite direction. So like love the fact that Google is listening to advertisers and giving us the transparency and control we asked for. But now it's like, why do we have AI Max when Performance Max exists, right? Like why are you letting us see the different channels if we can't choose them like we can in Command Gen? So it feels, I don't know, meeting Googlers and talking to Googlers, like it's clear they have very interesting ideas about the direction of specific features and this and that and the other, but just backing up and looking at like the Google Ads product portfolio, the power pack of AI Max for search, Command Gen, Performance Max, like I actually don't get Google's strategy as clearly as I feel like I used to.
Especially because again, like all three of those, I would agree with that. Like it would almost make sense to me if they're like, okay, PMAX, you have like, this is the bottom funnel that makes sure it captures everything, this is Demand Gen, this is the top funnel, that's going to find you the new stuff. And then, I don't know, like whatever some of the other stuff is, whatever, right? And that's just not how it gets communicated. So that's always been a little confusing to me. Like there seems to be a mix. My theory, and you probably would know this more than I, just because you used to work at Google a while back. I've interacted with Googlers, lots of different Googlers over the last, 15 years. And it is interesting. Google is like any other massive corporation in that you just get that many people and that many teams and that many products and things like that together. And there's just a lot of like individual stuff going on and innovation and things like that. And also then it's like bringing that together and stuff like that. And so a lot of this is conjecture, but I just wonder if there's the need for someone who really is like overall driving exactly what you were talking about. Like what is overall, like what are we trying to do as a whole? And not just like, oh, hey, this team over here came up with something cool. Okay, let's throw that in. Oh, this team over here, that's what it feels like. I honestly don't know. I don't know what their org looks like. So maybe there's someone like that.
There should be. And I mean, like Philip Schindler, who was the first, he oversees all of the commercialization stuff, but he, many degrees, like when do you think the last time Philip Schindler logged into a Google Ads account, if ever? Like, no, that doesn't happen. Right. And I think that's actually, my observation as someone who used to work there on the sales team, where we would be given, comm docs of how to talk about certain products. We'd be briefed, by the product managers, maybe, then we'd go out and sell the thing. The person who's working on video reach campaigns never communicates with the person who's doing AI Max for search, right? Like these live as these separate features. And as Googlers, and again, I think this is true at any large company, you're incentivized to do new things, to launch your initiative, right? To be a leader, try something new. And so you end up with all this hodgepodge of stuff all over the place. And I don't think that's just the case in the ads organization. So now there's this whole hodgepodge where it's funny because like AI Max is a branding exercise. Like it's no longer automatically created assets. It's text customization. It's no longer the broad match setting. It's going to be the AI Max setting with these three options within it. It's no longer DSA. It's keyword list targeting, right? Which is DSA. So it's interesting that on the one hand, it's like AI Max for search, brand new. But on the other hand, it's like, this already exists. whether you call it search only PMAX or an evolution of the broad match setting or an evolution of automatically created assets, we're just going to give it a better name and hope it lands better. And of course, say AI, because AI, Google loves their AI.
Yeah. Or at the very least, if there is just some radically, dramatically different, awesome type stuff, then do, figure out how to communicate that in a way that just, we're all marketers, that just makes it very clear, that sells it, like helps us understand all of that. One interesting thing, like I don't know, sometimes I think of this stuff and I'll share it in like feedback sessions, and I'm like, sometimes I never quite know. I'm like, man, I'm not sure if I'm like sharing this and it's like the dumbest thing they've ever heard, or if maybe it's like the most important thing they hear because it's just someone who's finally like, look, hold on, what about XYZ, right? And sometimes like I'm an old innovation era Steve Jobs Apple fan, right? And I think, and like he had his issues, but like I think one of the reasons that he was just such a brilliant dude is, as I've like read a book and that on it, is like he would touch the product. He would play with the product. And also there's a lot of brilliance. So, there really was kind of this perfect storm of an individual who really did understand innovation stuff. But a big part of that is he'd play with that and he'd be like, no, I want to go over here. Why are you doing that? And even if the team had spent, 7 months doing XYZ, he would send it back to him and be like, no, do it this way. And it was just like a better, simpler way. And that came because he was touching the stupid thing. And I kind of wonder if like, what if Google ads would really be helped by like the person who's supposed to be overall directing all this, like had to manage an account on an almost daily basis. And really like, so then as people were bringing it to this individual, they just really had this like understanding of, yes, but how, or not even manage, like maybe they manage it personally, but maybe they have to like, maybe they have to answer to like a client. So they actually have to like communicate to someone else, right? So then they could say, hey, that's a great idea. How in the world am I supposed to tell, Bob about that? And maybe it would actually, and again, to be fair, like that's part of what they're doing in these sort of feedback sessions, but also again, like I'll throw a little shade on them. I'm so happy they've started doing this the last couple of years. Like they should have been doing that for 15 years, 20 years, so they do some feedback and all that, but it just seems like they're more willing to listen now, which I love. Wish that had been sooner. Anyways.
I agree. I mean, as someone who worked in large customer sales, like they did listen to feedback from large customers, so that part has changed. But I will say, obviously I can't speak for all of Google, but when I was there, what I observed is that like Googlers, whether you're a sales Googler, product Googler, don't have to use Google ads. And actually, I was someone who didn't like put hands on keyboard in Google ads till probably like month 3 or 4 working at Google, selling Google ads. I was trained using Google ads, not part of my training. Selling Google ads was part of my training. And it was actually a colleague of mine who I met with because I was about to have a client meeting with this travel company, and I was using all of our various tools to find opportunities. This was before optimization score and recommendations. And I couldn't find anything. And so I talked to my colleague who'd been at Google a bunch of years, Julia. I was like, Julia, how do you find opportunities before a client meeting? She was like, well, what did you find in the account? I was like, what do you mean? She's like, well, what does the account look like? I'm like, I don't know. I used this dashboard and that dashboard. She's like, come here, Jill. Like, opened up the Google Ads account, showed me how to navigate it, right away found this and that. And I was like, oh, wow. But then interestingly, it did not help my career to be a sales Googler who could use Google Ads. So like I took it upon myself to become really proficient in Google Ads. I loved being able to go into a meeting, and if a client asked a specific, like, where's that button, I could show them where to push it. But then I was told in feedback sessions like, oh, Jill, you're not being strategic enough. You need to have more scaled impact and blah, 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 blah. So it's really interesting because the incentives are not there for the people who talk about Google Ads all day to actually use Google Ads. And so even now people are like, oh, you must know how to use Google Ads so well because you worked at Google. I'm like, no, I know how to use Google Ads so well in spite of having worked at Google,
Yeah.
It's just not
it's
part
true.
of it.
Yeah.
Or like I was in another meeting with an account executive, and this is when discovery campaigns were still around. and whatever video action campaigns were called at the time, True View for Action. That's what they were called. And so there was this bundle we sold of Discovery plus True View for Action. And like it was this whole sales pitch. We pitched it everywhere. And so we were in a meeting, and then the account executive pitched it. And afterwards he turned to me, he was like, so like, what is True View for Action and Discovery? And I was like, what do you mean?
That's amazing.
And he was like, is that like a new campaign? He just pitched the client on it, and the client accepted the pitch, okay? Then he was like, well, like, is that a new campaign type? I was like, no, it's 2 campaign types. He's like, oh, so can you do Discovery without True View for Action? And I was just like, I can't believe you don't know this, you know?
Yeah.
But, and so I'm not trying to insult Googlers, but like, they do an amazing job and they're right. But just like using the product is not at all part of the culture or the expectations, which did not concern me when I worked there. I just took it upon myself to learn the product. But now, as someone outside of Google, like really concerns me. It does.
That's super interesting. And I tell this people this all the time. Like, I don't know if I've ever met a Googler who wasn't helpful, who genuinely wanted to help, who genuinely wanted to make your business better, who genuinely wanted to hear your feedback, that sort of thing. I've had some arguments with the engineers more. And I think sometimes that's just because like a little bit of the philosophy sometimes of engineers is like, sometimes they can be 10 years ahead and you're like, no, that's really awesome. Also, like, what about this right now? But yeah, so again, it's not always like the individual Googler. It's more, just kind of that whole industry thing when I say they can struggle to accept feedback. And that seems to be changing. So I have lots of, I think you're like this too. I just enjoy pondering like philosophy of stuff, like why things get to where they are, how they are, and that sort of thing. And sometimes I'm like, man, I don't know. Like, it seems like there was some stagnation in Google in terms of the innovation over the last like 5-7 years, whatever. And it was almost like made them like try to go after like sales and dial in things and shake the couch cushions and stuff a little bit too much. And it's almost like the AI innovation has like refired Google like innovation again. Yeah, I don't know. It's almost like I kind of wonder, is that going to give them all like this, like, no, this is what we exist for, and like we can all like power through. I don't know. We'll see.
They've always
That's
loved it.
A theory.
They've always like, externally we may say like, oh, like is smart bidding the right solution, or is the optimized target, all these things. When you're in Google, AI is the answer. There's no debate about that. But you mentioned ponderings, and of course we know, Kirk, you love to ponder. You literally wrote the book Ponderings of a PPC Professional. I'd love to switch gears a bit in our conversation, talk more about that, because I mean, you wrote a book that has sold very successfully. It was actually the first PPC book I ever read. Really enjoyed it.
Whoa, that's cool.
And I just published my first book, and so I think it'd be cool to talk about that a little bit. So tell me, like, take me to the beginning. Why did you decide to write that book?
I've always wanted to write a book, just in general. For some reason, it's been one of those like bucket list items. So I think, and then there was like a point, I think it was like 2019, 2020, COVID thing was hitting, all of that. And I kind of realized like, man, I've put out a ridiculous ton of content through all of these different publishing content, things like that. And I think there's almost this where I'm like, I like don't want to waste that. And so really that's where my book came from, was gathering a bunch of stuff I'd written and like editing it and making some of that, up to date. And then, and I've already released an updated version on Ponderings, which actually changed a ton. Just because I was like, it's already out of date. I like the green version. The green version is way better. So if you have the yellow version, if someone has the yellow version and they're like, I already have a version, the green one's quite a bit different. So anyway, I thought of like, should I make that a different book? And I decided not to. So, because I actually just wanted to take the yellow one off the air. So you can't even buy the yellow one anymore unless it's secondhand. So
vintage.
Yeah, vintage, exactly. Vintage, worth a lot of money.
So for you, the process of kind of assembling the kind of articles or posts or things you already had and packaging it up as a book, which I mean, content repurposing, right? It's
yeah, that's exactly.
Yeah, and you wrote another book as well, right?
Yeah, Stop the Scale. Building a digital agency you actually like. Yep. So just kind of
a digital agency you actually like, I take it then?
Yeah. I do. I like my agency. Yeah, I like my
the
job.
motivation for that book similar? Like, how did that come about?
That was, I think, like, over the years and pondering, I've just really reacted against this obsession with business size and running after cash and money, as if it's like the end goal, and also I've seen this increasingly separate path, in my brain at least, of those who really are focused on building a business to scale, the decisions they make about like everything, who they take on as clients, how they hire, all that stuff. And then those who are a little more interested in just like pursuing things like quality of service and things like that. And I know those are not always separate paths, and that's no oversimplification, but there really is, to me, two separate paths that really determines a lot of that stuff. And I just kind of wanted to put some of those ponderings down, and then talk through how I actually did a TEDx presentation as well that kind of expanded it even beyond like agency stuff and more into like just a business, like how do you define business success, that I still like. So yeah.
And so is that still something you kind of talk about on the circuit and write about, or more the PPC, like kind of both? How do you balance these kind of different messages and topics?
I'd love to talk more about the business stuff, but no conferences want to bring on someone who's like, hey, do you know that like you don't need to obsess with growth all the time? I've pitched it to a few conferences and they never accept it, which is kind of funny to me, which is fair. But like, it's like, we don't want you to talk about being happy and, profitable and things like that. We just want to know how you can scale. So again, it just doesn't always. So basically, to answer your question, I just pretty much talk on PBC, but I'd love to talk on the other stuff. Once in a while on podcasts, I do. People are more interested in chatting about it in podcasts, I found.
You're putting it out into the universe then.
Yeah, exactly. Starting a revolution.
Exactly. Well, yeah, my book also started a bit from a similar place. I had started my Inside Google Ads course, recorded a lesson about audience targeting, and it was just way longer than any of my other lessons. And so that evening, I kind of went home and I took the transcript of the lesson. I was like, I can do something with this, and wrote a whole bunch of it. I think I had like 30 pages, and then I didn't touch it again for 2 years. And then I came back to it, and it's like you, like I always thought I would write a book, did not think it would be a book about Google Ads, but I've just like always felt like I had a book in me.
That's cool.
And then got it out there. And then like Glutton for Punishment, I'm already starting book 2 now. Book 2 is going to be about bidding. That's
awesome. And I'm excited. Okay. So I'm curious, like well, you don't have to give away the book if you want, but a lot of bidding models change a bit, right? So how are you going to make sure that by the time you release it and publish it, like stuff hasn't changed? And that's not a challenge. It's like a legitimate question, because sometimes, as you know, like I designed a course once with shopping ads where before I finished, Merchant Center, just the stupid UI changed, and I literally had to go through every single like slide of I had screenshots and change everything. I was so annoyed. But just like the rate of change, I'm interested of like how you're thinking about that bidding conversation with change stuff.
I mean, it was something I thought about with audience targeting. Like I finished writing this book January 1st this year, sent it to the interior layout designer, and then I emailed him in February. I was like, okay, there's 2 things we really have to change that changed. One was about age in Performance Max, because I had said you can't do that, and you can now. And I forget what the second thing was. And then I planned to release it in March. We didn't get it ready in time. And I was like, this has to come out in April, because something could happen at GML in May that changes everything. And I need it to at least be right for like a month. Thankfully, so like with GML, I was also like, oh my gosh, is anything in my book wrong? Nothing in my book is like wrong.
That's awesome.
I thought about that. And so that's why on the cover, I wrote first edition, because I was like,
I saw that. Yeah. I thought that was pretty funny.
Thank you. Well, there has to be, right? So
yes,
right now, it is correct and up to date. Nothing drastic. There wasn't really audience news, I guess, thankfully, at GML. But I thought about it hard with this one. With bidding, it's interesting because I was debating the second book. Should the second book be about keywords and content targeting to kind of round out the targeting topic? or should it be about bidding? And I decided keywords are just changing too much right now. Like IMAX was just announced. Like I don't feel like I can write that book now because it's too in flux. Whereas bidding, I mean, I know smart bidding exploration, the biggest innovation in a decade. Like it's not that big an innovation in my opinion.
Well, or if it is, like, help us understand how.
Understand. But I think, bidding, I guess the reason I landed on bidding, I didn't think it would change as much. I do my weekly Inside Google Ads podcast where I answer questions people have asked me on social media, and I get more questions about bidding than anything else. Like I've done 3 times as many bidding episodes as any other topic. And to me, bidding is really just the foundation of Google Ads, it's the auction and ad rank and quality, like that's all related to the topic of bidding. So whereas this went straight into, audience targeting, which is this one really specific, interesting, growing area of Google Ads, I thought it'd be good to do bidding as this like core foundational, let's dive into like how Google search works and how the auction works as the way into then bidding, exploring all the bidding strategies, and then all the nuances of bid adjustments and portfolio. And anyway, cool. I wrote the table of contents like 2 weeks ago. That was me being like, okay, I'm doing it.
Yeah. That's awesome.
So I'm excited about that. So I would love to release it in like the first half of 2026. Again, I'm like, I would feel too nervous releasing it close to GML just in case. And then the second edition of this one, we'll see. Yeah. So how long for you between the yellow and green edition of Ponderings, and what made you decide it was time?
I think it was 4 years, 4 or 5 years.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And that book, just the title, it's more like philosophical, so it's less likely to go out of date. But ironically, there still was stuff that went out of date. And then also there were just certain, which I don't really mind as much. It's just, you shift in your focus. And there was quite a bit of like agency type stuff in there, like very specific agency conversation or tips or whatever, that I just wanted to pull and make it a little bit more of a general PPC, even marketing book. So that was also a big part of it. And then there had been quite a few things I've written since then, just various like privacy things changed a lot from 20 to 25. And so just wanted to, ponder that and its impact on Google Ads and that sort of thing. So that was what it was. So
it's smart doing ponderings rather than more of like an everything you need to know about means it does not go out of date as quickly.
Yeah. Exactly. Evergreen content is nice. Although you basically have recurring revenue with like, hey, bidding changed again, better buy my next book.
I mean, that's my Inside Google Ads course, right? Like that's what I do with the membership. Because I'm always adding new lessons, updating lessons. Like we just added a lesson yesterday from Emily Wood. She's a Google Ads expert and a LinkedIn ads expert. And I thought, oh my goodness, it would be amazing to have a LinkedIn ads lesson for my course members of Google Ads practitioners. So we added that. And then I have 3, for every campaign type, I have 3 lessons. So for demand gen, it's like demand gen explained, how to set up demand gen, how to optimize demand gen, and then repeat for all campaign types. And so I decided, I was like, you know what? Enough has changed in demand gen since I last filmed these in August 2024 that I have to update them, adding in things like the channel selections. And there were some changes with optimized targeting. And anyway, so I am constantly having to update it. But the flip side is like the recurring revenue. It's a subscription, right? So people keep their monthly and annual memberships active.
Yeah.
Have you ever explored a course again after your previous experience?
So I've done like 3 or 4 courses, and I just hate doing courses. It is not for me. So I don't like, I started that YouTube channel, Merge Center Mastery, and even that is like, I'll like do 3 in a week, and then I won't do one for like 2 months. Like it's just, and that's part of it with a course. And like props to you, like you have to be. I felt beholden to the course. So the Udemy course I did was about the most exhaustive, big, trying to keep up with that. And I just felt beholden to that because, if you had people ask questions, you did have to get back to them. I mean, you were the instructor and then like you had update stuff and people would be like, hey, this is not updated and all that. And so at some point I was just like, I'm just kind of sick of this. And it actually worked in my favor because like Google killed smart shopping and it was literally a smart shopping course. So I think like without too many tears in my eyes, I was like, sorry. And I like took it off. And I like had people ask me, is your course still up on Udemy? And I was like, no, it was outdated. And I didn't feel like turning it into a PMAX one, a couple of years ago. So
Well, I guess you're an agency owner, and so the various content and stuff you do all supports your business of getting clients to your agency, which is different than my business. Where, like, I'm not an agency. I'm not even a freelancer. I don't manage ads. My business is Google Ads coaching and teaching and training. And so the courses, the book, the podcast, the YouTube, the LinkedIn, the conference, like it all feeds into that. But you've got quite the content engine of your own going. So I'd love to hear a little bit more about how you think about your content and how you show up and how it kind of feeds into your business.
So, very unironically, I will say it's a mixture of fear and OCD.
That's all good things are, right?
And maybe some narcissism. It's kind of like the world needs to hear what I have to say. And it is kind of funny. Like, you'll meet people where they're like so smart, and you're like, man, you should say something. They're like, no, no one would want to hear this. And I'm like, you kind of need a little bit of that in you, where you're like, people need to hear this, to like put something out there. Not necessarily narcissism, but yeah, I mean, a lot of it. So I haven't done as much content over the last couple of years, just because like the agency has kind of gotten to a point where I'm just doing more with that. But I have been trying to carve out time again to like focus more on that. But a lot of it for me over the years had just been, like, I joke about it. I actually do have clinical OCD. But some of that has been to my favor, because I'll just like get obsessed over XYZ thing. And like, I'll have to dig into it and figure it out. And then I did that, and I'm like, I have to write about this, the world must know. And so that's where a lot of, like, especially my original articles and things like that came from. Lately it's been a little bit difficult, again, like I said, just to carve out the time, or even like the energy. That takes a lot of energy, just to, as to really be interested and excited and dig into something, and then like write it out. And so that's like impact me. I'm actually trying to figure out a little bit how to like rekindle some of that lately. Maybe it's all like, maybe I'm just getting old. Like, I hit 40 this year, got 6 kids. I don't know. I'm like more tired than I was 10 years ago somehow.
I relate to that. So, I mean, I only have 2 kids, not 6, but I relate to that.
Yeah. So anyways, yeah. So I was trying to figure that out. Oh, and then I said fear, because it's like, I truly do have like probably this healthy fear of knowing, like, if I ever shut up and stop talking online, like someone will talk PPC. And I do want to kind of keep this thing going. I like my job, I like my business, and so that means I need to keep getting clients. So I'm always doing content for 2 years down the road. Because that's how, like, that's what happens, is like, you can get clients from like that article you wrote yesterday, but it's honestly more of like a building brick by brick thing over time. That I've learned. And so that's a big part of it for me, is just knowing like this thing I'm doing, like this is going to like, I just sent out, I don't know if this will work or not, but I just sent out 1,500 of my books to various conferences. So I paid for all that. I did all that. But again, with the idea of like, hand this to all your marketing people. I'm assuming there's a lot of junior marketer, all that stuff there. And just kind of the idea of just like, I don't care if I make money, I lose money off of that, but like, I'd love to get my thoughts and that into a lot of hands. And then, hey, if people are interested or they liked it, maybe 2 years down the road, when one of them is the VP somewhere, they'll call me, like that sort of mindset, I think, rather than more of an aggressive, like, sales type thing. So yeah.
It's a great point. It's something I found as well in content creation, and the place I think a lot of people give up too soon. Like, when I get clients now, my focus for content now, it's really my podcast, which I post on YouTube. So my podcast and YouTube, a lot there. And then LinkedIn, and everywhere else is just kind of like, my YouTube videos get repurposed onto TikTok, but I'm not like actively on TikTok. But like, I had a client last week who booked a call with me because she's been following me on TikTok for years, and all of a sudden had a Google Ads question and boom, booked a call with me.
Overnight success.
And someone else who, I've been a subscriber to your newsletter since the early days. And I looked in the analytics, like never showed up as opened an issue. Okay. But then all of a sudden a friend of mine, asked me a question about Google ads. And I said, well, you have to talk to Jyll about that. And then even thinking of the way that like AI overviews and AI mode work now, I get quite a few clients now telling me that ChatGPT recommended me to them, which blows my mind.
Yeah. We just got a lead that said that.
Yeah. And it's like normally the way people would come to me in a coaching call is they've consumed a bunch of my content wherever they found it. They book the call and we have this hour where I don't need to build trust. I build trust through my content. And then they book the call, and then we have this thing. Whereas it's interesting with the ChatGPT clients, it's like ChatGPT recommended me. They trust ChatGPT, so they book the call with me. And then on the call, I still do need to build trust, improve myself a bit. It's like an interesting way that I've had to adapt my style. But the point I was trying to make is the reason ChatGPT recommends me is because of this huge mountain of content that exists out there. And I know when I talk to other folks, whether it's in our industry or related industries, like, oh, you're everywhere. You're like, I want to create content and do this and whatever. And they get started and the first couple of posts get like 200 views or 200 impressions. And then after 2 weeks, they give up. And it's like, no, you have to sort of have this narcissism, which I feel like I have a bit of that too. Just like, I want to get my thoughts out there and I've got something to say and I'm going to hit publish and say it. At the beginning, it's going to be bad. My first TikToks were cringeworthy. My first tweets were blah. My first LinkedIn posts were so like navel gazing, but you get better at it with practice. And then you build this community. And then, like we were at the GML barbecue the night before and I was getting food and a woman came up to me and she said, oh, I love your podcast. And I was, like, she was so excited. And I was like, no, believe me, I am so excited. Thank you. Like, whoa, how cool is that?
It's so cool. Yeah.
But it takes
amazing
time to get there.
Yeah. No, I agree. I was speaking at a conference once, and this is funny because I don't remember who she was, but it was some like YouTuber person. I don't think it was like it's not like it was a huge YouTube influencer, but she wasn't like a nothing. Like, she had a following. I don't remember what her name was. But we were all kind of chatting. Some of us speakers were chatting, and she mentioned just like how hard it is. And this was like 6 years ago. And YouTube has gotten even bigger in terms of creators and things like that. But she was saying even back then, like how hard it was to get a following. And she said, like, I think she said something like, you're probably when you start out going to be doing videos daily for like 2 years with basically no attention at all. And that's like, basically you have to like just accept that and kind of power through and keep building and that sort of thing. And, obviously there's going to be variations on all sides of people who are shorter than that or longer, or people who do that and never work out. Cause you still do need some talent. Like Jyll, you are very well spoken. You have this ability to communicate complex Google Ads things in a simple manner. And like, that is a skill, and maybe that's something that you've developed, but also I think there's some level where like I don't think everyone can do that. Like everyone has, I believe, some sort of strength or talent. It's just always different ways, right? And so that's one of the things that you found is like you just like if you're able to do that well and you can do it and you figure out the hooks, things like that, cool. Like you get good at TikTok, right? Not everyone can do that. So like, yeah, someone might try to be the next, Jyll, and they just can't quite get to it because maybe they don't have that piece. But overall, I just really do think exactly like you said, like you just got to put some time into it. And sometimes, at some point, like I said, I've doing this for like 15 years now. And at some point I have kind of also learned like some of the, I'm just like, I will out content them. Like like there have been times where I've seen people like kind of come up and they're saying like a lot of the similar things or whatever that I am. And back in the day, and like I said, I've kind of dropped off of some content, but I was like, I will just outright them. I will write more than them. You will outpower them. Yeah, exactly. Just with that idea of like, if you're the person people think of when it comes to Google bidding, it doesn't matter if you're the world's best, you know. There may be someone over in Georgia who knows bidding better than you, who works in-house at Delta Airlines or something. But like, if no one knows about them, you're the one they're going to go to. And like, there it is. Like you did it. That's what the content is. So that's sometimes, yeah, a big part of it, I think.
It's true. And it's something I told people, you know, I get a lot of people in our industry coming to me asking for advice. They're like, Jyll, I want to do what you do. Like, how do I start doing that? And I said, you know, you don't have to be the smartest or the best or any of that, absolutely, but you do need to have something unique to say. Mm-hmm. So being, you know, the 200th person to try to jump on every time there's a piece of Google Ads news, oh my gosh, there's this new button feature. Like, no. Like,
comment GMO and I'll share
with you, right? Like, there's people already doing that, and like, we don't need more people doing that. What we do need is more unique perspectives. And so I'll share, like, for example, you know, I happened upon a Google Ads Help Center article about smart bidding exploration about a week and a half ago, before GML. This is like totally coincidental. And I was like, that's really interesting. And I, you know, didn't want to just post like, hey, who's heard of smart bidding exploration? Here's what it is. I thought about it. And I, you know, and I was like, okay, like, here's my perspective on this. And like, based on what I'm seeing here, I think this would be really helpful for this kind of advertiser and really not helpful for this kind of advertiser, you know? So it's bringing my own expertise and perspective to something rather than just being like, here's the news. And so that's, you know, the advice I give people. Like, everyone has something unique to say. What's your angle going to be? What are you going to share that only you could say? That if I covered up your name in the feed, I would still be like, oh, that sounds like Kirk. You know, and that's something you have to develop. I don't think you have that the first day you sit down to create content, but that's what I really see from you and from the other people we're with at GML and from the other people we sort of see on the speaking circuit and stuff. It's like everyone has figured out this unique perspective, and you may agree with them, you may disagree with them, but you respect them. Like Andrew Loke is someone, when I first saw him speak at Friends of Search in Amsterdam, like, I disagreed with so much of what he said on stage. And yet I still really appreciated his talk, and I learned something, and, you know, I became friends, like, and now, like, he posted on LinkedIn today, and I was like, wow, I agree with everything Andrew said. What's happening to me? You know what I mean? And I think that's great. And one of the great things about our industry is, like, there's no one right way to do it. Therefore, there's room for all these different, unique, diverse perspectives.
Yep. And like, also a little bit of peacocking, you know, a little bit of like, that's like, we are still in marketing. There is some level of just doing something interesting or being something that people remember, like, you know, being someone people remember or doing something unique. And sometimes I really do think that is figuring out what that is, maybe that you are really good at, or whatever that might be, like, kind of figuring that out and then just kind of leaning into that. And yeah, like, some people aren't going to like it, whatever, but for the most part, there is something that makes you unique, you know? So like I, especially over the years, like, there's been various things that I've kind of been, quotation marks, known for. But one of them was like the meme guy, which is funny because, like, I don't really do many memes anymore. And you might not even know that. I don't know. But like a few years back, I was like the PPC meme guy because, like, I would just meme everything. But when I would write like these longer form articles where I was trying to ponder, I would really try to get, I don't know, like, a lot of people were so professional. And I was just trying to be like, I don't know, I think this is dumb. And, you know, just kind of trying to be myself, be a little goofy even, and just really let my personality go through. And I, you know, some people probably hated that. And then I think it was really endearing. You know, like I said, like, you just have this skill, especially like hooks, for whatever reason. You have like the best, you have the best hooks in PPC. in fact, you said something the other day. It might have been in one of our closed door meetings where, like, you basically started out with a hook, and I was like, dang, she is good at that. I was like, I've got to get better. I've got to figure out how to do hooks better. Like, it was so funny.
When I said
so anyways,
speaking to a room of
it might have been
PPC experts, was that in the world?
Yeah.
And I won't say what I said next after that, but
yeah.
Really said.
Yep.
Well,
so,
listen, Kirk,
anyways, yeah.
It's It's been such a pleasure. Again, I've seen you in person a few times, but we never get to just sit down and chat like this. So if
this is great.
Being narcissistic and making content out of it is the way we're going to get to do it, it's a pleasure
to
get to do it. And we are recording this live, and this is going out on the PPC Zone podcast, where the mission is to support and elevate diverse voices in PPC. So thanks for making the time today, Kirk. Really glad we got to do this. And I look forward to hosting you at a PPC Zone 5 event coming soon.
Same. Yeah, no, thanks so much. And yeah, let's do this anytime.